Welcome to this little webinar about how to do senses-based learning and how to integrate it in your teaching. I hope this will be useful. It really is a little video to try and gather what we've learned about senses-based learning since we started the project. So first, we need to remind you of what is senses-based learning. Our definition evolved a little bit since we started the project. And now the definition that we're working with is that senses-based learning is a pedagogical methodology for tertiary education, focusing on exploring and developing sensory awareness and skills, as well as critically reflecting on their importance in education, research, and professional practice. So what does it look like in and especially out of the classroom? What we've seen when we started applying senses-based learning is that we often found ourselves outside of the classroom. And what it looks like is students engaging with the world, maybe in a way that's not so standard for most tertiary education environments. So what you see here on the photos, for example, are students that are doing sensory maps of their environments, of their urban environments. At the bottom there, you see a sound map that is trying to kind of map the different sounds and the way they melt into each other. And to the right, you have this very gifted students, the map who has been tracking the sounds of wheels on the square. So we've done a lot of different experiments, and you can see a sample here in the picture. We have insisted on interdisciplinary approaches. So we've gone to the medical school, we've experimented with art materials, we've worked on proprioception, we've worked with clay, we've worked with blindfolds, we've worked with all kinds of different formats. One of the kind of biggest finding, I think, for us was the typology of learning goals. We started very much with looking at hard skills, so things that we're used to kind of working on as university or tertiary education educators, things like problem solving or networking knowledge or using sensory research method. But what we found is that those hard skills were often very much combined with soft skills. So developing empathy, developing self-confidence, observation skills, so things that we were not expecting. So what's interesting is that they combine very often. It's not one or the other. And we're working now on a tool to help you kind of combine those different skills and kind of link them to very concrete exercises. So back to the how-to. So the core principles of senses-based learning course design for us have been really interesting to kind of develop. The first thing that we looked at was what content do we want to teach? And what we found is that we were not always clear when we started about what we were trying to train. Were we trying to train the senses themselves? Were we trying to train the senses as object of study, as a research method, or using the senses to understand other objects? So for example, when we're training the senses themselves, are we aiming that they see better or that they hear more carefully? So working with blindfolds, working with all kinds of sensory suppression to try and get them to focus on a specific sense. So that would be training the senses themselves. Senses as object of study is more something like taste through history, for example. How has taste evolved, or our understanding of smell evolved through history in different social contexts. Are we focusing on the senses as a research method? Are we trying to get them to develop skills such as that sensory maps we were talking about earlier that are more ethnographic kind of tools maybe? Are we wanting them to use their senses more in their research approach? Or are we using the senses to understand other objects? So for example, are we using the senses so that they can understand better complex topics such as the Anthropocene or things like that? So that problem of the what was actually quite interesting for us when we were working, because it's not that it's necessarily one or the other, but there is a tendency when you design a course to put the emphasis on one aspect. So it's important to think about it when you're designing your course. Another element in that kind of how-to that seemed really important to us is actually the teacher and the teacher's context. We don't think that everybody can teach everything. And you need teachers that are very much process-driven. Teachers that are aware of comfort zones and willing to come out of their own and that of their students. Teachers that are setting more flexible goals, that know how to facilitate. Students that are very much aware of the students' needs and their limit. And also teachers that are actually used to using their own body as a teaching tool, that are aware of their teaching environment and that can therefore anticipate sensory outcomes, but are also open to others emerging. What we found when we practiced senses-based learning was that most of the teachers tend to become excellent players with the different ingredients, with the room, with the material that was available, and really keen to bounce from the students' reactions to activities. So things were rarely going as planned, but the outputs were always very productive. The third thing that we found was really important was where we do it. So, for example, if we were working in real life or as similar as possible real life contexts, such as museums, hospitals, streets, etc., what we found is that there was really authentic, so those authentic learning spaces, there was really a better connection, a better use of the senses, because the standard tertiary education rooms as they stand now, and we hope that this will change in the future, are very much tending to homogenize the space and be very bland. And those are not actually the environments that you're looking for. You need environments that are sensory stimulating, that are flexible. So things like labs, studios, studio spaces, stage, those kinds of spaces. That's really where you want to do your teaching, senses-based learning teaching. So we finally get to kind of like the how-to. So this is the really how-to of the how-to. So the first thing that we found really important actually in designing those activities and courses was the sequencing. Something that would be very hands-on, for example, might not work at all if they don't understand the theory. Or, you know, if there was a really fruitful hands-on exercise, but no reflection moment, it didn't work either. So what we found as a sequencing that seems to work best in our classrooms are to start with a sensory icebreaker so that you recenter the attention of the students on their senses, then explore some theories and preferably do a reverse classroom for that so that the students would have read the text before and that so you're discussing theories that they're familiar with. Then hands-on exercises. And then, of course, as I said, a reflection moment that brings back together the hands-on exercise and the theory. What we found also is that you need to explore various forms. Students kind of see you coming after a while, so you need to really address various senses as you're developing your courses. And also in order to address different forms of intelligence, different preferences, learning preferences of the students. We found that what worked best with sense-based learning was really to use your creativity and use the element of surprise to make learning fun. Sense-based learning is going to put the students outside of their comfort zone. It's just because it's so unusual in terms of what they're used to in terms of tertiary education. So if it's not fun, it just becomes an annoying extra things they have to do. So it's really important to keep that idea of fun really alive and to kind of transmit the enthusiasm. So you need also in the how to think about where the training should take place and with what materials. Because it's been one of the key for an activity to work or not. What we've seen is that the same activity in different spaces doesn't necessarily work if you translate it in another space. Same thing with materials. An activity that works really well with a certain type of material, for example, paint, will not work at all with clay for some reason. So not for some reason, it's just the engagement of the students is different than with the different materials. So thinking about the materials. So for example, just to give you an example, when we worked with clay, the reaction of the student was often one of unfamiliarity. A lot of students hadn't touched clay since they were in primary or even kindergarten. So it's the distraction and the memories that were brought back by the clay were useful for certain types of exercises, but for some others, it actually distracted from what we were trying to do. So I think it's really an important part of the process to think about where and what material. So the last kind of ingredient of our how-to is, of course, the evaluation. So we're in tertiary education, needing to evaluate things. And so one thing that's important is that you have to understand that when you're doing census-based learning, you're evaluating a process, a road from A to B. You're not evaluating a result. You need to stay away as much as possible from numerals and to stay away from good or not enough type of language, this kind of qualitative language, and use instead observational terminology. We've designed some evaluation grid that we found worked really well for what we're doing. But we're really keen to gather everybody's experience and to look at that. So you'll have that kind of sample evaluation grid that's available on the website here, but you also have a video that combines different ways in which people have evaluated census-based learning. There, I hope this little how-to video is useful, and I hope it makes you really want to start with your own census-based experiments. Please do keep in touch and let us know how it goes. We're super curious to see what you come up with, and be creative and have fun. Thank you for your attention.